I will tell us all when we're going to start. So it's recording. We're good.
Yeah. And then
Cool.
if you want, I can just send the file to you, and then you can do any editing you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody, up in the left-hand corner is my beloved husband of 45 plus years, Robert.
Hello, Robert.
And as you can see, Jane is the lady with the glasses besides myself. Anna is the lovely lady with the crop top. And Larry, or Jerry, is our newest one. He's the man with the beard, similar to yours, but his is whiter. And then his son is the one with the glasses on. And Allison is the one that she told me she was going to be late, but she's not late. But Anna, you kind of know, because we've both been praying for her and the situation going on in Israel quite a bit. And Allison is the one from Scotland. And there's Jonathon. I don't think you've ever seen Jonathon down there. Jonathon, the gentleman up in the upper, or wherever he is, he's got his hand. Yeah, that's my husband up there with his hand like this. That's Robert. So
nice to finally see you holy instead of just like flirting around in the background.
I got people dropping off right and left.
Yeah, really. And then Daniel, you have to go up on view in the upper top right hand corner and click on gallery, and that keeps us all on, because right now you've got it on speaker, which only picks up people who are talking.
Hey, real quick.
And this is Daniel,
that's
our moderator.
Oh, yeah. So Kevin and Jerry, I messaged you guys privately a selection of questions. So look through those and then just kind of fill your brain with some answers. I sent these out a couple weeks ago, hoping to get answers to similar questions. And then I was going to build from these based on those answers. So just take a gander at these. I might just, when it comes to you guys, pick you out and ask you like just directly, whoosh, one of these. Cool beans? It'll be in your chat box.
Okay, so we still have got Dena and Soleah. She should be coming on soon. Yeah, have you guys seen our ratings?
81, she said.
Soleah's message.
Yeah, we're nationally, I think we're out of all of them right now, we're 55 when I last looked. So, woohoo! Oh, hi, we got somebody joining us, Stephanie Rabb.
That's my wife, Stephanie.
Oh, hi. Yay, so we at least got spouses coming. Yay, good.
Or people that just sort of flit through the background occasionally. Nice.
Okay, yeah. And Deborah is my cousin. She's out in North Carolina.
Hello.
Hey, Dad. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. And I don't know if this is Sayed's coming on or not, because I don't read that language.
I'm guessing it's one of Anna's friends.
Well, I also have a friend in India that's supposed to be coming on too. So at least he said he was going to.
And I'm expecting a couple.
And and I've got possibly a couple more coming on too. So we can handle 25 on the screen. So, and we're already recording. Everybody proud of me? Yes.
We are.
Very proud.
Here comes Dena. Hi. We're kind of introducing people that come on early. You'll see a gentleman that has Robert W. on his Dena. That is my husband. And then the gal that says Deborah W. Kinchlow, that's my cousin in North Carolina. So we've got
There we go.
And we already have somebody that bought a book. Yes, one of my friends, and she sent me a personal note saying she really is liking it.
Oh, good. Good.
She's reading it. So, and she's a reviewer. She does
Oh,
a lot
cool.
of reviews.
Great.
So
We have quite a few sales of it already.
well, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I've got people that have told me they bought it. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
We have
Yeah,
at
there are
least,
quite a few.
I bought one last night. I
we
went
had
through
20
pages.
yesterday.
20? Wow.
Ooh.
Woohoo.
Wow.
We rock.
that's
We rock.
rock.
Okay, Jonathan, did you bring your cigar?
No, I'm inside today.
Oh, that's right. Last time we did this, he had a cigar and
Trying to get
was-
on my glass of wine, but God, my hair looks
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deborah, Dena is in Norway. Soleah is in Pennsylvania.
Good.
Jerry L. Urbin is in New Mexico. And Allison is in Scotland. And Kay Urbin is Kevin, their father and son. He's in New Mexico. Jonathan is in Alabama,
LA, Lower Alabama.
Lower Alabama, the first LA.
That's a good.
Daniel, Daniel's in Chicago. Anna is in Israel, and Jane is in California.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So we're all over the place. That's why we're working on adopting a name, Authors Without Borders.
Yeah.
So, because we've got no borders as far
hope
as
that
being
will
part of
work.
us. Oh, I think it will. I think it will.
I mean, I think I put it in my dedications. So
Aw.
I wrote it in the dedication.
That's okay.
So,
That's okay.
okay.
We're still waiting for me to get the author's copy so that I can approve the book. And once that happens, then everybody can order the paperback. In addition.
Did they
Info
find
that.
workers?
Okay.
Oh,
Did they
he's having a,
find workers for the paperback?
pardon, Anna?
Did they find workers for the paperback copy? You said they were missing people to work on it.
Well, they said that they were, right now, everything looks good other than me getting the print copy. Once I get that, because they already asked, I already paid for it. So as soon as it comes, then that means it'll be available.
Great.
As soon as that comes and I approve it, then it's a go. So evidently we got in just in time that it's not going to affect it. So, or I don't know if they worked out to something that maybe they're going to allow like Barnes and Nobles and the others to print their own. I don't know if that's something that that's just hyper speculation. So
Okay.
that I just hope that there's never any problem. So, and I liked your answer, Soleah. Did everybody see that to Dena's question about writing the reviews if you are in a location where you can't? Your friends couldn't write a review, they can go to Goodreads or the other book vendors.
I think it's also because they haven't bought $50 worth of stuff on Amazon because they're not, a lot of people are not Amazon users in Europe.
Yeah.
And so they were like, oh, we can't leave a review.
When I lived in Europe, I had Amazon Prime in the US and Amazon.de. So I was a mega Amazon user.
Yeah.
Soleah, could you send it again? I didn't get that.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm asking Soleah if she could send the email again because I didn't get that.
Okay.
I will forward it again.
Yeah. And who is Nina?
That's my sister.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi, Nina.
I'm a
Hi.
fan. I want to meet her.
You want to introduce her?
So yes, sure. She's so this is Dr. Nina Melaini, and she's my sister. She lives in Pennsylvania also, and she's an interventional pulmonologist, a lung doctor.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
Okay, why don't you
Okay.
tell her, introduce at least our names and where we live,
Oh,
her, because she can hear us.
do that.
She looks like your sister.
I'm sorry, where she lives in Pennsylvania.
No, where
oh,
we live, so that she knows who we are.
Oh, she was here last time, so I think.
Oh, that's
she
right.
remembers.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So Dr. Jane is
remember.
Aletta B, and she's in California. Kathleen in Arizona. Anna in Israel. I'm not sure where Kevin is. I'm sorry.
New Mexico,
New
Albuquerque.
Mexico. He doesn't know either. Allison in Scotland. My other sister who's in UK should be joining us. Jonathon in
Oh, how exciting.
oh,
Alabama. Dena in Norway. And Daniel, where is Daniel?
Chicago.
Chicago. Okay, I didn't know that. And Lawrence, Jerry, who's in
Albuquerque area.
like right next door to Kevin. It's his dad. I can't hear you, Kevin. You're muted, but I'm sure he's making a joke.
Ooh.
Kevin, you're muted.
Probably funny
Or-
too.
Excuse me for interrupting. It just occurred to me, we should change my name to Aletta B.
Yeah, we should. I will. I'll
Thank
do
you.
that right
Thank you,
now.
Kathleen.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so Soleah, I was saying that my father's on one side of, there's a mountain in between us, the Monsanto Mountains. He's on one side of the mountain and I'm on the other. It's the truth.
Well, not quite next door, but really.
No.
All right, so we are almost at 11.
Okay.
So are we good if once it's 11, we'll maybe even give it to 11:05, just posting the link, the Zoom link, to let anybody in, or
Yes. Yes,
okay.
we are.
Okay, so I'm gonna cue that up.
And hello, Leslie. I don't know who you're with. Whose guest are you?
Oh, she might be my guest, Leslie Dillerzillo.
Uh-huh.
Zolo.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Hi, Leslie. Welcome.
Oh, there's
Where
my
is she?
mom. There's
Where
my
is
mom
she?
coming in.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Where's Leslie?
Everybody.
Hi.
Hi. She ducked out of the picture.
Mhm.
Now, do they all come? I must have put all of them to come in muted. In the bottom left-hand corner of your screen is something that looks like a microphone, and it has a line through it. If you click on that, we can hear you talk. And if you, right next to it is like a camera, and if you put a line through that, that means we can't see you. So, but you can still see us, I believe.
Yes.
So you can do that if you want. Leslie, you want to return our highs?
Hello, everybody.
Hi. And then Allison, you want to introduce your mom?
Yeah, so my mom's down there as iPad 50.
No. So your
Otherwise-
Christian name?
It's
Yeah.
Mo, M-O.
It's
Mo?
Kayla.
I'm going to just put Mo
Mo?
there.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure can.
yes.
Oh, thank you. Lovely to be invited. Thank you.
So my mom's in
Good to have
Scotland as well.
All
She's
right.
just an hour away from where I am, or an hour and a half, in a place called Dundee.
Oh,
wee
I've
bit-
heard of
wee bit
Dundee.
further. Have you?
Mhm.
And yeah, mum's just very good at supporting me generally, so I'm very pleased to have her here. So it's nice to have a friendly face.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We are very glad that you made it back to Scotland from all of the flying issues that you guys
Yeah.
had when you went to that
Chelsea.
flower.
Yeah.
Yeah, to Chelsea, to the flower show. Yeah.
Well remembered. Mhm. It was an adventure.
Sounds like one. Good for a
So-
book.
All
So
right.
Allison, I have a question. I bought a 5-foot square piece of land in Scotland that's gonna plant a tree on, and it officially makes me a lord. Is that true?
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lord.
Where is it?
I have to look at the thing, the certificate.
I think that
wow.
just means you're subject to getting notices from the homeowners association in 2 languages.
Oh, no, it's the same language.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Mhm. Okay, we've
Great.
got Diane here, and we've got Ruth. Whose guests are they?
Ruth, hi.
Diane
Ruth Light
is
is
my
mine.
guest. She's the editor. She was here last time when we launched the tolerance anthology.
Okay,
So I
great.
invited her again for the
Great.
new event.
Welcome, welcome, Ruth. And
Thank you.
Diane is Aletta's. Did you say Diane was yours also, Aletta?
No, Ruth is my friend. And
Ruth is yours, and Diane is. Okay, I
Is
got them
Anna's.
confused.
Ruth and Leslie
Yeah.
are my friends.
Okay, all right. And who's Yvonne?
Yvonne is my wife's friend. She's connected to me. Hello, Yvonne.
Okay.
All right,
Hi.
let's go ahead and get started. It
Okay.
is we are recording in case anybody wants to review this later. Welcome to the question and answer for the autumn and anthology. This is the first of 4 books released in a series revolving around the seasons. Autumn is first, the next one is spring, then we'll do winter, then we'll do summer. So for autumn, in anthology, we all created two short stories. Well, I'm going to use little air quotes here. 2 shorts are 2 pieces. One, some of us created short stories, some a little longer than a short story. Some of us created flash fiction. One of us submitted a limerick, and then even one was built like a recipe that was on us. So there's a myriad of styles presented in many different genres. Hopefully some of you have been able to look over the book and read through it, and hopefully you have enjoyed it. We are the authors. We'll do a quick introduction, and then I will introduce everybody that's here, and then I will start with the question, and then if there are any questions that pop up, if anybody wants to answer a question, please feel free to throw it into the chat, and then I'll grab you, and then I'll let you present your question to whomever, but that'll help keep everything streamlined if you have a question. But everybody, feel free to submit questions. Writers, if you want to ask your fellow writer a question based on anything that we've discussed, please throw it into the chat. So first, I'll go through Allison Meldrum, one of the authors. She's waving hello. Jonathon, Bryd, Kathleen, Osborne, Aletta B, Soleah, Sadge, Jerry, Urbin, and Kevin, Urbin. Together they are just kidding. Anna, we have Dena, Lynn, we have I am D, and we are the Writers of Autumn. Writers Without Borders is the group that we have, the name that we have penned for our group. And so here are some questions. We're going to start with with Aletta. I lied. With Aletta B. Okay.
Okay.
Here we go. When you were 14, and you wrote the story, Why I Will Never Marry, you were inspired by your mother's disdain for all things feminine. And when you wrote Deceit and Laundry, that was inspired by real life events of friends of yours. How much of your other writings have been inspired by real life events, either yours that you have personally experienced or those of the people around you? And then how many of your works have not?
Ooh, I would say on some level, all of the work started with a little grain of something. I'm even thinking one story I wrote, Footloose, was really about animal cruelty. And it was inspired by a neighbor kicking a cat. So there are little tiny things. It could be just a little spark, but it gets expanded into a larger idea. So I'd say almost everything comes from something.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that being said, do you feel as though your writings then are a commentary on life from your own perspective, or are you just taking note of what's happening around you and then writing things?
more taking note and then writing, but I would say it's more an experience than a commentary on an experience. That's my hope.
All righty. All righty. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So we're going to move on to Allison. I have a question for you, Allison. So your love of writing was fostered during a high school English class with a pocket watch wearing teacher. You've parlayed that love of writing into several types of writing. You were a journalist, a copywriter, communications officer for the largest physical activity provider in Scotland. And now you're a freelance writer and consultant while working on your debut fiction novel. Which of these forms of writing has spoken to you the most? And which of those is the easiest to compose / which garners the most momentum in the shortest amount of time?
I think there's probably different answers to different parts of that question. I would say the one that captures my attention the most, the one I'd like to spend all my time on, is the creative writing, the fiction writing, the novel writing, short stories, all of that. But it's also the one that seems to take the longest to come forth. The other work I do, which is, I guess, my day job, is for clients who know what they want, and it's a very definite brief, and it's you get it right or you get it wrong. But when it comes to writing fiction and writing books for yourself, it's a longer process. And I don't know if the other writers struggle with this, but I have a lot of days where I'm not feeling that inspired. So it takes a while to get going.
Have you ever considered making yourself a client of yourself?
Ooh.
Where you present something like an idea, a storyboard of something, and you're like, okay, this is what I want to write. And then you take it on as though you're creating it for a client. Having the years of experience of doing that, have you ever considered employing that tactic in your writing?
That's a brilliant idea. I may borrow that from now. Thank you. I've tried bits of it. I've sort of dipped into some of the kind of tools of the trade where you do your planning and you do your character and plot setting and things like that, which I guess is the equivalent of researching for a client. And then I just put it all in a pile and put it to one side and just start writing. So I would maybe be a bit of a nightmare client, possibly, because
Okay. And then, so with the transition to novel writing as the focus that you want, do you think your other writing styles have prepared you for writing?
Yeah, I just think I'm one of these people that just thinks any writing is good practice. Whatever you're reading, whatever you're writing, none of it's ever wasted. It's just part of the experience of enjoying other people's words and different ways of writing. So yeah, it all contributes.
Excellent. Welcome, newcomers, to the conversation. We are the Writers Without Borders group who have produced the show, or not the show, produced the book Autumn, an anthology, which is the first of a 4-book series that takes inspiration from the seasons as well as other works. So we're going to move on to Anna P. Lipster. Anna, having started writing as a youngster in elementary school, how much of your writing was just for you that you have not shared with anyone? Like journaling or diary aside, how many works have you created? How many stories or pieces that you have written that you have just kept to yourself? And if there are any, why?
Well, at that time, I can say that none of them. I mean, all of them.
Okay.
I just started sharing my writings at advanced adult age when I joined my first creative writing workshop. And there was a teacher there that she was my guide, and she gave me the courage to show my writings, not only to the group, but to other people outside the group. And from there on, I went from one workshop to the other. And that's when I started believing that I can do something with my writing and not only, just throw them away or put them in a drawer or, the way I used to do before that.
So do you have a collection of those writings that you have kept to yourself over the years that you plan to release Or are you going to maintain, no, those are for me, and then everything I create from here on out, I'll be willing to share?
Well, I tell you, I started writing in elementary school, and most of it was just imitation what happened in class. So I would just rewrite whatever dialogue between the teacher and the child at home in a scrap of paper or the back of my notebooks. So I don't think I've kept them, but
Okay.
the other stuff, the short stories that I've written since then, some of them I looked at them again, and either I expanded or I changed some of the original plot into something else. Just kept the core. You know, it can happen.
Okay.
Not only new things.
Okay, good. And then, so having grown up in Brazil and then being a long-term resident of Israel, do you brainstorm or compose your stories in multiple languages, or do you stick to one and then translate it after?
I'm sure that some kind of translation happens in my mind, but I mostly write in English. I write in Portuguese, but it's between my friends and my family. I still have family in Rio. But I tell you what happened once. I was in a concert, and they were singing Hebrew songs. And I was singing along with the singers and the audience. And suddenly I realized that my mind was working independently. You know, it didn't have anything to do with me, because I was, in my mind, I was writing just the plot of a new story that it just popped in my mind. And I laughed at myself. I said, you know, my writing skills are independent. They don't need me for that. I can sing in Hebrew, and my mind is writing a story in English. So this is what happens.
That's great. That's great. All right, Dena, question for you. When you are crafting your stories, how much time do you spend researching things that you mention in the story? And then do you take time away from the momentum of the writing in order to clarify places or concepts that you put in the story? Or do you get it all down first, and then when you go back to review it, you research and you correct or flesh out the things that you have put into the story?
Yeah, I usually just write it all down, but sometimes I don't finish the whole thing till I come to this point where I say, oh, you don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, you're writing some good stuff, but you really don't know what you're talking about. And so then I guess I do stop, and I try and look. And I also have this problem that maybe Anna shares too, is that I write this word and I'm thinking, wait a second, where is that word from? And it doesn't look right. And isn't that an English word? I'm sure my mother used to say that word to me. And then I have to stop and figure out where that word came from, because it comes from some other language that I have running around in my head. And so that stops me sort of like researching a word. Etymology, sometimes it's just that. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so do you sound like you are a momentum writer? Like once you start going, you just roll the ball down the hill and you just let it go.
Sometimes it rolls over me, but anyway.
Do you create an outline for your story before you start writing, or do you just have a thought in your head, get your pen on the paper, and then just go?
Yeah, I am like this new, I'm a pretty new convert of this thing called Story Grid. And that is a lot about trying to think what you're going to do so that you don't have, so I actually have that in front of me, like wallpaper sort of. Then I sort of start running down the hill and the ball sort of runs over me. And then I try and I go back and I look. I'm not answering the question. I'm trying to do the planning.
Gotcha. Okay. Which feels more comfortable?
you know what's happened, which I think is this whole story grid idea. It's actually feeling better to do the planning, even though it's probably more comfortable to. Lately, I have something horrible chasing me. And that's actually not really so nice. I would rather just sort of stop and figure out what's going on and not be chased by this massive ball.
Then I'm going to pose this question to all the writers. Quick show of hands. Are you more a planner? Quick show of hands if you are a planner instead of the just flow. Okay, so we have 4.5 of those. Thank you, Jonathan. And then, so then the rest of us, I imagine, are just let it flow type of writers. You get an idea and then you just go.
I'm right in the middle.
Yeah.
Right in the middle. So
I
you
call myself a plopster.
You start writing your outline and then you just stop. You're like, okay, that's enough. Let's start writing.
Right.
Or I write the whole
opposite.
arc, know where the whole arc is, and then when I get to a scene, I know where I want it to start and where I want it to end. And then figuring that out is the fun part.
Okay. Right.
I call myself a pants liner.
Yeah, I think
by the seat of my pants, but I have an outline of where I'm going. And sometimes it's a more intense outline. Sometimes it's a bigger pair of pants.
Okay.
I
Kevin, you were saying something?
Oh, I was just saying, Aletta, you're a planner. I do the
That's
same
the other
thing.
word.
I get to a scene, and sometimes I let the character, though I know how I want it to end, I let the character who I've devised in my head take over. So when I get to something, there's a debate going back and forth, I ask myself, what would he say? Or what would she say? And when I say that, I say, well, that kind of changes the tone of the conversation, or how the it's going to elevate that scene. You know, it's like someone might not be much of a talker, but you think you want them to say these things. So maybe you're just going to show it in the form of their expression, but they're not going to say it. And so, yeah, you're a planner, but you let sort of the creative moment take over within the chapters or within the scenes. And
when this happens, I just change the outline. So I have at the end I have 10 outlines.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like to have at least some high points. I like to know the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then flow to that. I have done the exact, absolute detailed outline for one. And my very first book that I'm about to publish, I just sat down, and thanks to my wonderful husband, Robert, he gave me the time. And in 45 days, I wrote it because it just erupted out of me. So it was like I had no choice but to sit down and write. And that's the only one I've totally done that way. My short stories, I very seldom do any outline.
Gotcha.
I just kind of, it's
Let it
there.
go.
Mhm.
Okay. All righty. Next question is for Jonathan. Jonathan, a 5th generation Biloxi boy, have you seen in your writing the values of your community informing any of the family or community dynamics of your stories?
Well, one thing, the biggest story that I think I've written is my historical fiction novel, which takes place in Biloxi in the 20s. Of course, I'm referring to the 1920s. And I started this story when I was in 6th grade. Obviously, it sat for a while. And I learned an awful lot about the writing process as I went through it, because I didn't learn early on, just get it out and edit it later, because I stopped and restarted, completely changed all the characters. I changed my outline several times, 5 times in the beginning before I said, no, this is what I'm going to stick with. That was about 94, I think. I said, I'm going to stick with this and run it to the end. And then I finished it about 1.5 years ago. And for the last 6 months, I had one more wrinkle I was going to factor in. And as I tried to put in that wrinkle, I said, well, I needed to fix this, and this wrinkle makes that fix, because there's no such thing as changing just one line.
Right.
And I was actually working on it just this morning, and I'm down to only having one wrinkle left to iron out.
Nice.
But a lot of what I wrote, and when I finished writing it, I was actually living in Germany. And a lot of us actually, we met on a website called The Right Practice. And it was kind of like you post, whether it's a short story or something from your novel, and then other people critique it and you critique other people. And it was a way of building each other up and saying, hey, here's something maybe you should pay attention to. And as I was writing it, I'm 5,000 miles away from my home. And Ginger, my wife, always says, it doesn't matter how long you live there, it's always still home to you. And I said, yeah, it is. I mean, home is wherever we are, but my hometown is still Biloxi. And I found that while I was in Germany, 5,000 miles away, I would start writing about something. And I knew I had this mental picture because I've been there, I've been all over it. And I know it like the back of my own hand. And it came out in the writing. And when I would post things on The Right Practice or show somebody else, they could read it and they could see and feel the things that I was seeing and feeling. And I think that it was that connection, that closeness that was able to come out in my writing, that it made the writing that much better. And in a lot of ways, it was just therapeutic to me, because while I couldn't be sitting in the 95-degree heat and 100% humidity because it's 45 degrees in Germany and snow on the ground, I could write about it, and I felt home, and I felt home in my own words.
Good. Okay. So your Katrina memoir, you had mentioned how impersonal it was to you. When directly injecting emotional experiences into your storytelling, do you find it easy or hard to stick with what you remember happening, right? Trying to stick to the facts of what happened, or do you allow yourself to embellish? And if so, to what measure do you embellish your memories of emotional things that happen when you put them into your stories?
So as it relates to the Katrina story, I have never been able to tell the Katrina story without getting choked up or water in my eyes, period. Didn't matter if I was telling it or if I was writing it. And I started with a story that I had written several times. And I sent it to my editor, and I still have it right here because it was 6 pages. And she wrote notes on every page and then had a whole page of handwritten notes at the end. My cousin is my editor. She is one of the people that I called. She knew what was going on with this story the whole time it was going on. And she said, your story is shit. Maybe I'm putting words into her mouth. When I said that, she said, I didn't say that. But no, she was right, because it was a very poor version of the story. So it's very hard to take a story you have written and throw it out and start over completely. But in this case, I did. And it took me about 6 hours from start to finish. And I was ripping my guts out while I was writing it. And I had tears in my eyes while I was writing it. And when I got done, I said, that is exactly what this story needed, because it didn't have the emotion that I had just when I told it. Now, as to whether things are, embellished or remembered, there were several comments that I got, both when I circulated it in our group and from her, where she said, this would be better. And I said, yeah, it would be, but that's not what I said at the time, because looking back, we can always make things better. So for the most part, I would say that everything is exactly the way that it happened as I remembered it. And it's the same way that I've been telling the story since 2005. But I'd also, I hearken back to an instance where I remember I was in 4th grade and I was performing, and I had my dad's violin, and it slipped out of my hands and landed on the ground. We're standing on a stage, and I heard my dad telling that story, and it didn't change the story, and it wasn't, adding things that didn't happen, but the way that he told it made it a much better story. because he said, oh, well, before we left, he was polishing the violin, so it was slippery. And then he's standing on the stage and it just squirted out of his hand. And as it flew through the air, all the people in the crowd said, ooh, ah. And I was watching going, oh, God. And a little piece flies off over here. I was there. I watched it from a slightly different vantage point. He's right, but that wasn't the way that I would have told it. But there are ways of just adding an adjective here or a word here that doesn't take away from what actually happened, but does highlight it and does polish it up to make the story something that's much more memorable than just an incident that happened in the past.
Right on. Right on. So for all the newcomers, thank you again for coming in. We are the writers of the group Writers Without Borders. Have composed Autumn, an anthology, the first of 4 books in a series. If you saw a little notification pop up at the bottom of your page of faces, that is the chat. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and then in between going back and forth between the authors, I'll call on you to read out your question, and then your author will ask. You can either ask the group or you can ask an individual writer, but please feel free to post any questions in that chat there. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Kathleen, your turn. All right. So you had mentioned that most of your writings throughout life had been private. You wrote journals, all kinds of journals, diaries, and they were kept written for your eyes only. And then even the technical reports, that was like your first foray into sharing the things that you are writing, and that was during your time in the military. But the majority of your writing thus far, do you feel that with the time you now have as a retiree and the backlog of stories swirling throughout your head and your heart, do you find yourself rushing to get them all down? Or have you chosen just a small sample of the things you've dreamt up?
No, I find that there's an urgency within me to get it written. I am a more mature individual, and I just started writing. It'll be 2 years in December, as far as fiction is concerned. Prior to that, like you said, it was journals, it was technical writing. And then when I worked as a church secretary and a private secretary, I started a newsletter, and that was more my personal interpretations of events in the Bible and stuff like that. So that was really hard for me. I got A's in English, but I hated English because I hated the red pen. I was not good at grammar. But then I also found out that fiction writing is not really literary writing. So that might have been the big difference between me and my teachers. And because I just wrote as I saw it, like Jonathon was alluding to. I didn't write necessarily correctly. And the only time I got an A in English was when the teacher challenged us. He says, if you don't want to write an essay, you can write 10 poems. Or if an essay is not what you want to do and you're a craftsman, you can do a stage of an Elizabethan theater. You know, things like that. He gave us alternatives to show that we understood what we were reading and learning. And so I wrote 10 poems. And they were more allegorical, I guess you could say. And he liked them. I never got a red mark on them. And that was it. That's when I felt more accepted. But yeah.
Okay. So the legacy that you want to leave for your children, their children, and even their children, do you think you'll ever create a narrative family memoir along with the fictional works that you're creating now? I
doubt it.
Okay.
But my plan is to leave a legacy. That's what I wanted for this, for my writing. For the anthologies, no. The anthologies, in a sense, yes, but it all started with one of our goddaughters. We have two. God gave them to us when they were adults. That's why we call them our goddaughters. But she has stage 4 cancer for what, 10 years now, honey? He's the Robert on the screen. That's my husband. And she can't handle reading long length anything. And she can only handle ebooks because the book gets too heavy in her hands, and she can prop an ebook up and read it. And so that, and then remembering that my father, as brilliant as he was, he had adult ADD. If he read more than a magazine article, he was asleep or up out of a chair and restless and moving, couldn't sit still. And I thought about all the other adults that have that. What a wonderful thing anthologies are. It gives them a multitude of stories. My husband's mother is at a very advanced age, and she has problems too, sitting and reading, but she loves to read. So having an anthology in front of her, she can read a story and put it down and go take her nap. Makes all the difference in the world for them to have an outlet. That's why I wanted to do anthologies.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Kevin, we'll move on to you right quick. So having a father who writes, and that's not to say that he's going to be the answer to this question. But who have been some of your greatest inspiration as writers? Going back to when you first started writing, what were some of the things that you were reading that were inspiring you? And then even up till today, who have been some of the longest standing inspirations in your writing?
Yeah, so I have two favorite authors, Jack London and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and I've married up some of maybe close to the events that occurred in one and sort of shaped them. So I kind of stole a little bit of an element, not a theme, but an element. And so I like to write, I got this from reading a lot of Jack London, and I'm not talking about Call of the Wild had some of that, but some of the other stories where they're really going off into the wilderness and they're describing every element, every little bit of the environment, and trying to describe the environment they're in and how that captures hold of the characters. And really it's a controlling factor. The environment is another character in the story. And so I've really tried to work on that, describing in detail the environment. And I've actually scaled it down from what I used to do because I felt like I rambled on too much, which what he does in some of those stories. And I can see how his writing has fallen out of favor to some degree because there are some sort of racy elements, and some descriptions of the environment just drag on really long, even though in the end you really get the depth of what they're in, like how over their head they are just from the place they're in. And so I like to fill my story with some world building elements that I learned from Jack London. And I would say that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, I love the mystery element and the twists, that occur at the end. And so I try to factor that into my writing as well. I would say those are my two greatest influences in writing.
Okay. So a lot of writers, especially first-time writers, but this happens with a lot of screenwriters as well. The stories that they write, they are, or at least part of them is the central character. How often do you put yourself into your stories, either like you find that a character that you're writing responds similarly to the way that you do, or feels a certain way that kind of mimics the way that you feel about things? How often do you find yourself putting yourself in the writing? And then if you do, are you the main character?
Yes, I've often felt that I was after the fact, especially when the character was really boring. I realized that it's almost you, and it's true. It's almost you sheltering yourself from the emotion of that situation. Like you don't allow yourself to get upset, so they don't get upset, or they don't react, or they don't show the depth of emotion that they should be, because you're not really participating. Even though it's about you, you're not really there in the jungle. So you don't really feel maybe what they should be feeling. You have to, and I think admitting that is like a way of separating yourself from it. Saying this guy isn't, why am I'm writing me. I'm writing me with the cushion of not actually being there. Right? Something like that. I think I've sensed that many times.
Oh, right on.
And I've equally tried to force myself to like be the character who is the villain or somebody.
Okay.
But I get it. They're a better character when it's not me. Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. So for the rest of the writers in the group, the idea of trying to embody a villain with your own characteristics, how often do you see yourself in your stories? And then if you are ever trying to be the villain, or at least, trying to connect with the villain, what are some of the things that you use to stir up that part of you that really embodies the villainous characteristics of the anti-hero, or the villain of your story? Feel free, any of the other writers, to answer that one.
In-laws. That's all you have to do. You just plug into what your in-laws do and say, and then all of a sudden you're instantly a villain.
Okay.
I actually try and create, I look at it as a different person that I can slip into their mind and just read their mind. And what are they going to do? How are they feeling? What motivates them? What way are they really pissed? To where they want to kill somebody or do something like that, destroy a world. Why? And is it really going to satisfy them?
Someone once told me to actually research kind of testimonials of people that fit certain character descriptions. And then one of the villain in my novel that I'm writing is a narcissist, basically. And I was doing some research on living with a narcissist. And I don't know, my husband was obviously borrowing my computer for something, and he saw my last Google search, living with a narcissist.
Oh,
so
no.
I had some explaining to do. I was like, no, it's researching my villain. So I'm a bit old school. I research it almost like a project sometimes, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I do that too. I'm getting ready to write a mystery, and it's going to have a serial killer. So I've been looking at serial killers, watching some of the documentaries on TV crime, stuff like that. I've got books from about the top serial killers, reading why, how, all of that stuff to prepare, because I am not. So I have to open my mind a little bit differently.
I'm not sure anybody should ever look in any of our search histories, because there are definitely some weird topics in there. But I think that it's always important to remember that there are very few bad people in the world that believe that they are being bad. So even when you run across somebody that's just a, you know, a horrible person, in their minds, they are not horrible people. And again, if you're trying to embody that into a character, you got two choices. And one is you can have this paper cardboard cutout of a bad guy, which your story is going to suffer. It's going to be bad if that's your character. Or you can try to put aside your own feelings and thoughts and say, well, okay, if he really thinks he's doing the right thing, or she, what is it? What can drive him? What could possibly be that motivation? And you really, sometimes you got to wear that skin for a little bit while you're writing, and then you get done, you go take a shower, and then you try to watch the daisies or something so that you feel better about yourself after putting yourself in that bad situation. But you've got to make a connection with that person, and remember that that person is not deliberately trying to be Satan incarnate.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I try to, just whenever I see myself finding excuses, looking for excuses when I want to do something bad, and then I just extrapolate it and make it worse. And that's a villain.
Okay.
I work with a copy with a developmental editor, and the novel I'm about to launch, it starts out with a guy who, he really thinks there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. But I was 2 point on, and she says, you've got to calm that down because he really doesn't think that. He thinks he's fine. It's everybody else that's wrong. So, and Soleah and I went to a reading workshop, and the guy was reading my stuff, and he's like, I hope you had him killed at the end of this thing, because he's really bad. I said, I know he's a schmuck, but she says, because I was really liking him. And then I read this part, and it's like, who in the is he? So it's getting that, like Jonathon said, you have to understand they don't think what they're doing is wrong. In the most part, they think it's perfectly normal to go out and pick a person apart, and not have any feeling about it, because, oh my gosh, I'm curious to how they work. So nothing wrong with that, is it? Is it? So.
Okay, right on. All right, so we'll go back to the writer's individual. Soleah, question for you. You have a short story series set in one of the worlds of one of your novels, right?
Yes.
Now, describe the process of world building that you do for your stories. And then also with the practice of creating a serial experience with your short stories that takes place in an established world from your novel. Do you find yourself storyboarding potential future novels within that same universe, or have you considered writing more novels within that universe? Kind of like creating a collection of works that are not direct sequels, but are, kind of happening in and around the similar experience.
Yes, so that's exactly it. You already answered the questions.
Yes.
But my novel, I write contemporary fantasy. So basically it is the real world, but with some magic. Not everybody knows about the magic systems, but they are there, and it's basically based on Earth, and it's during everybody can recognize the word. And I started with my first novel that I am editing, and it's still in the works, but at the same time, when I just get too much into it, I just write short stories. And one of them was using a character from that novel, and they are called sensors. They are basically empath, but I had to find another word. So I called them sensors, and it just started with one story. My aunt, who's actually here, Dena, gave me an idea. She just wanted the story, and I said, okay, I'll write it, but it's going to be fantasy. It's not going to be real. So I took her idea and inserted into that word, and it became the judge sensor. Then she liked it. Other friends liked it. Aletta B here was my first fan. She read it on the right practice that Jonathon was talking about. She liked it. so everything helped me just write another one. And then I liked it so much, I just kept on writing, but I really have to stop and go back to the actual novel because I'm writing my third novel now, I'm editing it. And it has elements from that word, as you were saying.
Okay.
So it's not directly a sequel, and it can, like, people can read it and not even think that it's related. But for me, inside joke, I'm like, it's actually
okay, connected. Okay, so then going back to the idea of the world building that you do for your novel. So you've created rules for your universe, right? Contemporary, but with magic. You've created rules. So what was the process that you took to create those rules, and like the way that the magic functions and who has access to magic and so on and so forth? How did you create that?
So I started small, just with my character, and I followed that character. It had some kind of, I didn't have a system. I didn't build the system first, because then it would take the joy out of it. And I would it will look like work, and I just wanted to write. So basically the protagonist was just using some powers, and little by little they were building. And then sometimes if it was getting too easy for that protagonist, then I had to set some rules that if they use this kind of magic, then they will be hurt, or they will drain it. And from there, it just flourished and became a whole system with druids, censors, empaths, sorcerers, and all that.
Okay. Okay. And then, so as a published poet, right? As a child, you published some poems in your newspaper, your local newspaper in Morocco.
My dad did that. He's actually here. He's in Mawlainin. He's the one who just sent it, and he brought the newspaper with the the poem. So
okay. So then, with that being said, do you ever create poetry for use within your stories?
I actually, it's more whenever they do spells, sometimes it's in form of short poems, but I wouldn't even call them poems anymore. But yes, like it has a rhymes.
Okay.
But no, I don't write poems anymore. And I used to write them in French. Now I never wrote poems in English.
No. Okay. Okay. All right. So this question goes out to Jerry. Having experienced life across the decades and how all of them have changed and like they're so drastically different throughout life, do you find that when you're writing, do you create stories with the values of what family life was like for you when you were young, or do you do it more how things have evolved, and does it come from a place where you currently are? And then if you're writing from the perspective of your youth, right, and how things were as you're creating, do you ever find that you tend to kind of tweak family dynamics from then, if you find anything that was problematic, to make it more palatable to yourself now as the writer?
Wow. Basically, I just write from the standpoint of where I am today.
Okay.
I don't, there's some things I've tried to write when I was a teenager or a younger person, but mostly it just comes from today. Okay. I don't know if I answered your question now, but you've been asking some really good questions here. I want to compliment you on that.
Thank you. Thank you. So then, when focusing on then where you are today, do you ever, when you're creating your stories now, right, based on who you are now, how you think now, how you view the world now, do you ever take time to evaluate your emotional evolution as a person to get you here?
Another tough question. I don't think so. No, I just, we all write stories that we like, that we're, am I still on you? Because I get something just happened to my computer here.
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay. I don't really know how to answer that question. I've been a lot of places and a lot of things, and things just come into my mind, and I start writing about them. And to start with a story, I have to have a beginning and an ending before I can write the middle. So I have to aim towards the end. So we all probably do that in a way. And so I hope that answers your question. I don't know.
Yeah. That's perfectly fine. So then here's one more question for everybody. Why do you write?
I primarily because I enjoy it. When I realized that I could put my ideas on paper, and I got real happy about that. I saw that I could do it. You know, all the ideas that kept coming into my mind, I could actually make them concrete, tangible. So when I realized that, I was very happy. So that's why I write. I really enjoy it. I enjoy reading, and from there I started writing, and I felt happy. So actually, it's because it's really my pleasure.
Wonderful. I'll answer this question also. Why do I write? So throughout my whole life, I have found myself either running headfirst or falling face first into some measure of artistic expression. I was a musician for a lot of years. I've been a professional actor for a whole bunch of years. I started writing poetry as a child because I didn't know how to talk to girls, but I could talk to them on the paper, you know? And so I had that going. When I was in like 3rd grade, my teacher said, hey, if you don't want to do your book report, you can just write a play. So I wrote, 50 plays that year because I was never going to do a book report. So I have been doing some measure of artistic expression. And I think writing for me, I think acting and writing are going to be right next to each other in the places where I feel as though whatever measure of artistic expression that I could do, I do not feel limited. If I try and draw something, it's like if an elephant, was stomping on some paint and I'm like, no, this is a person. I promise it's a person. There's a disconnect from my brain to my fingers when it comes to drawing or sculpting and things of that nature. But writing or even acting, those are places that I feel like the things that are in my head and my heart, I can get out. And I'm happy with how they come out. Aletta, I saw you raising your hand. You got an answer there, Aletta B?
Yes, I think my answer to this is kind of multi-layered. Gloria Steinem once wrote about writing, it's the only thing I do that when I'm doing it, I don't think I should be doing something else. And mine is similar. If whatever else I'm doing, I think I should be writing. So I'm feeling less punished by my conscience when I actually write. So that's just one thing. I'm avoiding the pain of not writing. But then beneath that, there are things like developing my persistence for the times that things that it feels like my work is really a mess. I have to keep going. So it helps develop character. It's ever expanding. The more I do it, the more I learn and the more there is to learn. So that sense that I'm not going downhill, but actually expanding is really important. And a related one is, this is a little embarrassing, but for example, let's say I'm writing something, I'm writing a scene and I know the beginning and I have a sense of where I want it to be. And then I'll picture the people and all of a sudden I've had an idea, but all of a sudden something else takes over, something that's bigger than me, something that makes me touched, something transcendent. And that's a beautiful feeling. So there are, in short, many levels.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
I agree with Aletta that there's many levels to it. One of the first things was it was a release. And every time I get an idea and I at least create a short story out of it or write it down for the future, then I have a release. But it's not that I'm captive to it. It's that You know, in our lives, we can't control a whole lot of things. And in your writing, to a certain degree, you can. I mean, I have characters that decide to go off on their own, and I have to chase after them like everybody else. But it gives me something that I can decide.
Yes, I agree. It's so many levels. I started as a form of healing, as journaling. So, and then it just changed. And now I arrive, and of course it also, if I went through it and it helped me, so maybe if somebody reads it, it can help them too. But it's also now when I'm exploring more characters, and we were talking about villains before, now I'm trying to understand. And at the beginning I wrote about what I knew, so of course I inserted some enemies in there that I needed to just get rid of. But the more I wrote, and to make them more relatable and credible, like I just had to understand and see from their point of view. So now, and I could see that, oh, maybe they did have an excuse for what they did. They saw the world differently. So it's just expanding, and I'm learning so much at the same time as I'm writing. It's wonderful. So I really enjoy it.
Okay.
I would actually say the reason that I write is because I can't not write.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think a lot of us feel that way. And sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, I need to sit down and write. And we might write out a few tortured paragraphs, you know. And then once we get through those tortured paragraphs, then we start really getting to it. And the first really long piece that I finished was an allegory of the book of Jonah. And it was novella length. And there were, obviously as an allegory, a lot of literary aspects, because things meant things and there were metaphors. And how can I show this? And it became fun at times, but at other times it almost hurt because I couldn't get it out of my head fast enough. And I got done and I felt incredible. And now I look back on it and I'm like, God, what was that guy thinking when he wrote this crap down? Because my skills as a writer, we always develop. If you start a story, by the time you get to the end, you're a better writer at the end than you were at the beginning. And the other thing that I think what drives me and what keeps me from not being able to write is that desire to be creative. And so I grew up, my dad was a public school teacher and he taught science. When I'd get bored and I didn't have anybody to hang out with, I'd go out in the backyard and do experiments, right? And he said, you can do anything you want, just don't be a public school teacher. And I ended up becoming an engineer because engineers are practicing scientists. And, you know, for the early part of my career, I was in design and planned production because there's something magical about taking this field full of trees and bushes. And then you go in the office, you draw some colored lines on a black screen, you print it out on a piece of paper, you hand it to a guy, and, you know, 6 people with hangovers and heavy equipment go out and build from nothing in this field that used to be overgrown. And that creative juice and the drive, it just, I think, naturally also translates well into writing, because you can't design and build 24 hours a day, but you can write a story at 2 o'clock in the morning.
It's funny you should mention teachers, Jonathan, because well, my mom, who's here, she's a teacher. She's a maths teacher actually, and I think she always wanted me to be what you do, which is an engineer. But unfortunately my kind of strengths were not quite down the scientific route. But I would say that it's entirely because of teachers that I write. And it's because a teacher once told me that I was quite good at it, and I've never forgotten that. So sitting down and doing something that someone has told you you're quite good at is just a really nice feeling, no matter what else is going on in your life. To be it, because we're not all good at everything, you know, there's and I just like that feeling. So for me, teachers are very, very important, I would say.
Yeah, I had a teacher once in 9th grade. I was just being a smart ass. She said, you know, oh, we need a quote. And I was like, nuts. And she was like, okay, where does that come from? I was like, I don't know. I just thought it was a great quote. She literally sent me out of the room to the library and told me to research it. And as a result, I learned an awful lot about history. And I mean, I love history. And I can tell you why he said it, what he said. And it was that the teacher, even taking me as a smartass, found a way to spur me on to greater heights.
Okay. So
I want to
go ahead.
I want to take over for a few minutes.
Sure thing.
Because I want to interview you.
Okay.
You've traveled to a lot of countries, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use things that you saw, did, or anything from your travels in your writing?
Some. So when I'm writing anything, I flow until I come to a point where I want to know like exactly. So if I mention something outside, like, oh, there's a tree here, I'm like, wait, is there a tree there? So now I have to go on like Google Maps or some kind of satellite view, and I really research like what's on that corner, like what do I see there. And so a lot of this is born from the podcast that I host where I create stories for my guests. It's important for me to write about where they're from. And so in doing the research there, I'll like look up, okay, what does this actually look like? If I want to describe the street, that they're walking down, I need to know what it looks and feels like, right? And so I also did, I wrote a novel in pieces, right? And the pieces were having a character travel to a bunch of places. And so again, I did exhaustive research on there. So having my love for travel and having been to a lot of places, part of that informs, how they might feel about being in a certain place for sure. But I have to know, okay, what is there? What do the people look like? What are some of the small businesses? What do the homes look like? What based on my own time spent in different, like living in really small towns and major metropolitan areas, how do people respond to their surroundings based on my own experience? And then I kind of try and put that into the characters and their experiences.
That's good. Would you say that you are a realist in your writing, or are you modern or historical, or what would you call your type of writing? What genre?
My genre is yes. I don't feel like I subscribe to any particular genre because I'm motivated by all kinds of things. And having been an actor for a lot of years and having done projects across several genres, like the first project I ever worked on was a horror film. And I've done a lot of commercial work, and a lot of the stuff I've done is funny, but a lot of it is improvisational. So I get to kind of inject myself into different, scenarios. So the genres I write vary. It kind of varies on how I'm feeling. And this is also part of, like, as a musician, I played several genres in music, depending on the instrument that I was playing at the time. So I think depending on my emotional state, that might decide what story I'm writing and in what genre that might fall. I will say there are probably a few that I won't ever, I don't feel super motivated to tell stories in this style, like most history, probably, like, so historical writing I'm not super keen on, and then like I think like romance, I'm probably not keen on, because I think for me, I love the turmoil between people. And I think all of my stories would just be a bunch of sad people trying to figure out why each other's sad, and then not acknowledging their own sadness, and then just trying to hurt each other. So you just be reading 300 pages of two dummies hurting each other over and over, but without ever acknowledging, like, oh, I'm actually sad. I'm sorry, I'm hurting. I'm hurting you because I'm sad. And I don't think it's fair for you to smile right now, because in my heart, I'm not smiling.
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So yeah, there's that. And then so yeah, but otherwise I love exploring all of thrillers, science fiction, fantasy. I like all of that nonsense. So everywhere else except those, I guess.
I have one more quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you hit a wall, what do you do?
Oh, this is good. I was going to propose this question to everyone as well. So I'll answer it, and then please, everybody else, feel free to chime in. The palette cleanser. I had mentioned this on our call recently. So for me, if I ever hit a wall, or if I ever know that I'm about to tackle something that is important to me, like a piece of the story that is important, and I'm not fully there mentally or emotionally, or I'm distracted by things, I'm not fully there, I need a palette cleanser. Right. So for me, some of my palette cleansers are I'll watch something stupid, right? Watch a 30-minute program of something stupid, or maybe I'll play some video games, right? Play some Super Mario Brothers. Or what did you guys have when you were kids? Did you guys have video games when you were kids all those years ago? Maybe one of those. Well,
not when I was a kid, but when my kids were kids.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Yeah. So I'll play something just to do something that requires little effort, that I don't have to focus on, and I can just let go, so that after that palette cleanse, then I can, okay, now let's get back into it.
Okay. That's good. Jonathon, what do you do?
Well, sometimes the joy of being a pants liner, if I'm stuck, I just say, well, let's jump over this spot or go on to something else. And I had one spot where I got to this point and I just put in brackets and I said, next time you get here, don't sit for 6 months, move to the next spot. And I mentioned when you start writing, by the time you get to the end, your writing has improved. And a lot of times we'll start a story at the beginning and we'll go all the way to the end. And then our beginning is really weak. And if our beginning is weak, nobody's going to want to read to the end where it gets good. So for instance, my historical novel, I started it and I started going along, and then I said, you know what, I need to jump back. So where I actually ended up starting the story is about chapter 5 now. And then I jumped over and I wrote chapter 2 and 3. And then I went to chapter 9 and 10. And then I came back and wrote chapter 5 again. And so I jumped around. So my palette cleansing was more related to where I was in the story, and I cleansed it by fixing another point. And a lot of times that can also improve your plot, because you can think of a subplot, because now all of a sudden you're back over here and, oh yeah, that really should pop up here. And sometimes, like Daniel, you mentioned doing something else, or I might play a game, but I don't like read a lot of science fiction novels while I'm working on a science fiction story and then try to read a historical fiction novel, because if I do that, now all of a sudden I'm thinking of my historical fiction novel. And then when I take a break and I read a thriller, now I'm working on my thriller. So yes, I do have multiple windows that are open. Some windows have to deal with this story, some with this story, some with this story, some with this story. And it's not really a palette cleanser, but it's jumped from one to the next, whether it's inside the same story or risk going on to a different story and trying to work on that.
Anna, what do you do?
I can leave the story in the middle, the book in the middle, and go read a book, or I watch crime series on the TV, NCIS or FBI or something like that. But usually I play games in a computer, solitaire, mahjong. So I get, after that, my mind is completely blank, and I can go back to my writing.
Okay, Jerry, what about you?
I hate it. I hate to hit the block. I often start a story and I'll start going down that road, and then I get just where I don't know how to get out of it. So I guess that's the same as hitting a block. And I just have to go do something else. My son told me one time just to work through it, and it's almost impossible to work through it without getting boring. So I always have to go out and do something else. Maybe start on I have a lot of short stories that I'm working on, So I just go over and I'll do that for a while, then I'll come back. And maybe I'll figure out a way out of it. Maybe I won't. I don't know.
Okay.
But it's really hard, difficult.
Yeah. Dena, what about you?
Booze.
Dena.
Yeah, no,
You're-
I think, yeah, I really like to watch like Netflix from other countries. And so just like Anna was talking about, I try and find a mystery that's like from Finland or, you know, Bulgaria or something. And I watch those on Netflix. And so then I'm reading along in English, but I'm listening to this whole other world, you know, and watching the screen develop. And that really helps forget why I'm in
Alice?
such a big mess.
Yeah. Allison.
Probably exercise. So I would go for a wee run, or I've just got a dog, puppy, so take him out for a walk. But just generally get out of the house and get into fresh air and move my body. And that then I start to sort of things start to work through in my mind that way. And by the time I come home, I've kind of got a few ideas that I want to go with. So that's what works for me.
How about you, Aletta?
Well, if I'm stuck in one place, let's say I'm already starting to work on our next thing for spring, and I'm stuck in one place. So then I started doing research about how to grow butterflies, because that will be in it. So I'm doing research that forwards the piece while I'm waiting to settle about the part where I'm stuck.
Huh.
Now I'm interested in doing butterflies myself.
Kevin, what about you?
Booze.
Food?
Booze.
Booze.
A nap. Sometimes when I'm just laying down, things come to me. So I might just walk away and like Aletta said, research. Like if you're stuck, like in the story that was in this, the Crystal of Karakoram, all of those natural the mountains, all the natural features are really there. And so they're all geographically correct. So researching it and finding this glacier next to these cliffs, and it's all right where it says in the book. They're actually taking place in a real place. That helps you. And then if you look up images, like Daniel said, you look up the place, you'll see things that then inspire you. Like, yes, they would have to go through this first.
Yeah.
Kind of like avatars for your story.
Yeah, I'm a realist, so I write. If there's something fantastic, it's somebody's imagination. Not that there is a magical person, but somebody's imagination that something happened is it. There's some mountain lore. Well, it doesn't necessarily. Does it play out? Is it real, or does you just think that it's real because it was a legend, and it's sort of real, natural occurring events are happening, and you can blend those together.
Soleah, what about you?
Almost like Allison, I move my body, but to go to the kitchen and to just stuff myself.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Right
and
there.
I check emails. And look.
Yeah.
So.
Well, what I do is I go bake, and my husband is very grateful for all the baking I do. So are my neighbors, some of our friends, because I bake so much. And then, or take a nap, and then I'll wake up with the answer and come back to it. And I'll put a little thing in my document saying, this is where to start again. So I know where I dropped off and where I was hitting the wall. So.
Here's like a small piece of advice somebody gave me a whole bunch of years ago. They said, think gray, right? So if you get stuck with something, and he was specifically talking about how he solves like mathematical problems, think gray. How would a washing machine solve this problem? How would a catcher's mitt solve this problem? And if you can get your brain out of like human thinking and where you're stuck and try and think of a way like so outside of the box, right? Then, you know, you might blur the lines between what is a box and what is not. And that sometimes can help. Allison said she has a question.
Yeah, Daniel, so one of the areas that I struggle with the most is dialogue. And I'm just curious as to whether your experience as an actor and as a person who's obviously very skilled at communicating with people, if that helps you with the dialogue process.
Hey, let me call you right back.
So I'll say for me, when I come up with dialogue, I think I call back to the years and years of having conversations with myself. So like as a kid, I grew up in a pretty rough and tumble part of the city. And so we spent a lot of time at home. So I would entertain myself by having conversations with myself. And, you know, so throughout the years of experiencing that, I think that has helped to make conversations easy and fun. Although I will say that I know that I sometimes will encounter the issue of the talking heads. And the concept of the talking heads is when you have a whole lot of dialogue in a row, right? And the dialogue does, it serves all the purposes. It conveys the thoughts of the characters to each other, and they provide context for where they are, and they do the exposition in the conversation. So I know I love talking, right? And I love when two people are talking. I love the banter, and I love when people are sharp and witty with each other, and I love when they're ribbing each other. I love that. So I love to do that, but I know that I can, you know, make that too long, so I have to cut back. But I think the fact that I have always been okay with just talking, right? I was that kid that got the marks for talks too much in class every year, like multiple times a day. Can you tell your child to stop talking? In the name of Jesus, amen, I guess, right? This is the kind of stuff that I experienced growing up. So like through that, I think that has helped me with acting, with, you know, I would say yes, would have helped me with, you know, conversation writing there.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have a son that can't stop talking as well, and it's nice to see what it becomes in later life. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Daniel, it's back to you. You
Excellent.
have control.
Okay, so if there are no other questions from the viewers, we'll ask one more quick question to all of the writers, and then I would ask all of the writers at some point, please put in, if you have a website, put your website down so that everybody that's viewing can follow you in the future if they see so fit. But now they'll have quick and easy access. So just go ahead and put it in the chat box there. Everyone watching, you'll notice a little icon pop up in the little dialog box, and then you can, you know, follow us in the future. And then, so everybody, what are you reading right now?
Oh, I'm reading 2 books. Well, actually 1 book and another thing that I'm learning about, and that's what Allison does about writing coffee. But the other one is Haven, and Haven Bonded, and it's by S.J. Sanders. It's an alien Earth human sci-fi romance, which is my genre.
Okay.
I'm reading this. Jonathon might find this interesting. I'm reading Ace Atkins. It takes place in Mississippi mostly. So.
Okay. Good.
I'm reading a mystery, the Stowaway.
So I just purchased an anthology of short stories. But this is actually a class that talking with Brandon, who was with us on the tolerance, he was doing this class, and now I'm going to be doing this class with him. And they're looking through, it's an O. Henry Prize short story book, and it's really about how you can use other people's short stories to improve your own craft. But I was reading a lot of thrillers because I was working on my story that's really kind of a military thriller. And one of the authors that I was reading, it was a military thriller, but it was a historical fiction military thriller. So then I saw, oh, he's got another book here that looks interesting. And so now I'm back in the historical fiction, which is probably why I've been working more on my historical fiction novel than on my thriller, because I really mean it. What I'm reading is what I really want to work on. And if I switch to cleanse my palate, that gets set to the side for a little while.
Okay.
I'm reading a novel by a British author called Gillian McAllister, and it's called That Night, and it's just a really good mystery suspense yarn. And yeah, a good page turner. I would recommend Gillian McAllister.
Okay.
Who is it?
Go ahead.
Who else talked?
Go ahead, Aletta.
Okay, right now I'm on a binge of reading Jodi Picoult. She's written about 26 novels, and I'm looking at what she does. And there's an intimate internal story of someone who changes a lot, but there's also a social issue involved that's in the context. For example, suicide or assisted suicide, and she shows both sides of the dilemma. And that's what interests me a lot. So The Pact is about teen suicidality.
Oh, I've read that. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yes. Mercy is about assisted suicide. The Second Glance is about respect for Native American burial grounds. The Book of Two Ways is about two kinds of love and which one is she going to take. Small Great Things is my passion right now because it's about privilege and power and race. So that's what I'm on a little self-study course.
Anna.
Yeah, I'm reading a book by Lucinda Riley. She's an English writer, and its titled A Love Letter, but it says nothing, no romance at all. Is a murder novel, conspiracy, and everything that shouldn't be in a love letter. She writes so well, and the story is so gripping that I went and I bought 2 other books by her because I'm curious to read more. Her style is fantastic, really. I have to hold myself not to go to the back page, to the last page, and see what happens, because she's really good. I've never heard of her, so I'm really happy.
Okay. Dena, what are you reading?
I'm reading Karen Jennings, who is like a new author, and her first book was longlisted for the Booker Prize, and I saw it in the English here in a bookstore in Norway. And the most interesting thing about it is that she writes in like it's literary English, and it's the kind of language that I feel like sometimes on the Right Practice and other places I've been criticized of writing that way. Sort of, they call it like purple, or they call it something. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but I really enjoy it. Purple? Well, yes. I've heard people have called my prose like purple prose. I don't know what that means, but maybe too wordy or something. And
yes.
But anyway, Karen Jennings writes in a literary way, and it's her very first book. She actually wrote it took her 4 years to get it published, and there's some good articles. She was interviewed on The Guardian, so you can read about it, because then she got longlisted for the Booker Prize, and now she's like, woo, and it's all great. And now it's a nice story. It's an interesting story, but I'm most impressed that she's just wrote good standard literary English, kind of. Yeah.
Kevin?
I'm actually just rereading and rewriting 17 chapters of something I was trying to finish up.
Yay! I can't wait.
Started this, yeah. So Dena commented on it, the Victorial edition. It's a woman's writing a newspaper in 1894 in a small town in Missouri. And it used to be, had a different title. It was about a cowboy who's trying to adjust to modern times because there aren't cattle drives, there aren't doing these things, and he's fallen on real hard luck. And then as I wrote that out, there was a female character this was a sideline story. She's starting a newspaper. She's the only woman in town that wears pants, and she's smart as heck and just puts everyone in their place. And so it started to become more about her. And so I'm kind of rereading where I was to keep the elements, but rewriting it. So that's the focus on the story.
It's good. I've read part of it. It's very good.
Yeah, it's
full
really,
of
really
humor,
great story, fun story.
full of miscommunication. Where people are there's a few intellectuals
Great characters.
in town. There's a few intellectuals in town, and some of the people aren't that bright, and so they don't quite get it when things are said.
But that makes for great characters. They're great characters.
All righty. I've been reading this book called Wool by Hugh Howey, and it's like this post-apocalyptic story about a bunch of people that live in a silo and the dichotomy of those in the silo that think that the people in charge are lying to them and it's safe to go outside, and everyone else who's like, it's not safe, don't go outside. So which is it? Yeah. Which is it? Is it safe to go outside or not? So it's pretty good. The characters are all really, really good. You get really attached to them and fairly quickly. So Wool by Hugh Howey. He has a series in that vein, and he's got some other things as well. So I'm digging that. Okay, so the floor is now open. Any of the guests watching, do you have any questions for us? Feel free to unmute and ask away. Anybody watching, visiting with us, everyone, thank you all again for being here for our conversation. Anybody have that Jeopardy theme music we could play in the background?
Well, I'm curious. Two of my friends, Ruth Light and Dion Propstor, are actually writers themselves. I'm wondering if they have any questions they would like to ask, or any comments about your own work and what you're wanting to do with your work.
Same way with you, Deb.
With who?
Deborah also is an author.
No, I'm a slow writer. I've been working on this historical fiction for a long time. And it's time for me to revise, to pull it together, to tighten it up. And that's one of the hardest things to do. It's easy to write, but to take care of all the details, to go back. I'm a new writer, or I was. And so to go back to the old stuff, I've been avoiding. And that's one of the things I have to do very quickly. And start doing the minute things, the timelines, to make sure that the characters I've created are fully rich. I've been reading a favorite author of mine, James Lee Burke, because description. And that's one of my strong points, but I have to make sure that my description doesn't override my characters. So
yeah, I recognize the issue. Okay. Ruth?
Well, I don't know quite how to describe myself right now. I kind of want to say I'm in a fallow period right now. I'm in a wonderful monthly writing group, and we have recently decided to meet twice a month, and that's good. And so there's more energy, so we've been together for 10 years. So wow. It's a very solid group.
Yeah.
And my weakest area as a writer is finishing, polishing, rewriting, and all of that doesn't interest me very much, but I determined in the last year or so to make that a focus. And I polished up a story that has been around for a long time. And I workshopped it in the writing group. And I spent many Saturdays with one person in the writing group, specifically the two of us working together, and got this polished up and sent it off to the Master's Review. Anybody? Master's Review? No?
What's that?
Yeah. It's an organization that puts on workshops and contests and that type of thing. And so I sent it off for a contest, and I paid extra for editorial feedback. It was a very negative experience. Getting back feedback. My writing group just was wonderfully supportive and completely dismissive of the feedback that I'd gotten. So the whole thing turned out just fine.
Okay.
I seem to have ground to a halt in terms of sending out my little story to other places. And I think it's ready to send out to other places, but I need to put a fire into myself and get that done. The name of it is Dead Cat Pot, and it's a true story.
Oh, Dead Cat Opt?
Dead Cat Pot, P-O-T.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh.
And it's a really true story about how my two brothers cooked a dead cat.
Oh.
Oh, a comedy, no doubt.
Kinda.
Feel good story of the year.
Right. Yeah. And I enjoyed listening to everyone, and I felt that it's such a wonderful experience to listen to a group of writers, because I can relate to so many things. There is such a community feeling. I don't know any of you except for Janie, Aletta. And but there's so many, there's such a community feeling when writers get together and talk about their process.
Yeah, it's vital. Special. It's very, very vital. Deborah, what about you?
Well, I don't know where, can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know where to come in from. I come from a literary background. I taught high school English for 30 years, and most of what I was doing was teaching literary criticism, and all the literature I read was classic literature. And someone was talking about loving the sad stories, and I'm at a point in my life now where I need to unlearn all of that and get rid of my analytic critical voice and just get into my creative voice and get out of all that essay and all that literary criticism and that angst, and just have fun with it. And I am so aware that I am not a great writer, and I know so many great writers, and it's hard to turn it off. But I am 69 years old. Time is a wasting. And if I'm ever going to get anything finished, I need to turn off that critical voice and just have fun with it. So right now, I am following Dean Wesley Smith and taking his courses and writing into the dark and going with Heinlein's rules. If you've ever looked at them, you don't waste any more time on overanalyzing and somebody mentioned, not Stephen Pressfield, but the story grid, Sean Coyne.
Sean Coyne, yeah.
And I have a novel pretty much written, and it's a romance, but it's a clean romance. It's a wholesale romance, wholesome. But I've analyzed it to death to the point that I don't know what I've written, and I don't know what I've done, and I don't know what I've actually put on paper. And I'm just going to have fun with it. And I'm going to write it. I'm going to finish what I write. I'm going to not worry about editing and all of that. I'm going to put it out there, and then I'm going on to the next one, because I have closets full of unfinished writing. Closets full. And early on, I had a student. If anyone is familiar with, well, when I was student teaching, I was 24 years old, named Kay Gibbons, but she became, I mean, just off the top of her head, she became a writer, and her stuff was looked at all across the world. Oprah picked her up as one of her favorite novels. I mean, she was sitting in my class. And I've never felt I even measured up to my one little student who is so sweet and so wonderful, and whose life has been filled with a lot of problems. She was manic depressive, and all of this is widely known. But I've had that yardstick over me just for 40 years now. I'm ready to get rid of the yardsticks.
There you go.
Put it out there. It is not going to be literary things that I really enjoy reading. But it's going to be things like my mother would enjoy reading, but I want to be able to sell. And I know that I'm not good enough to, but I need to hush about that. I need to write what I think will sell. And then the hard part is getting into the genre. I can't do what Kathleen is doing. I've never read science fiction. I read Stephen King's The Stand when it came out, and I really loved it, but I can't write these Twilight books and the ones where the boyfriends are wolves and vampires. I can't do that because I don't even enjoy that.
Yeah, you got to write what you like. I mean, something that's interesting to you.
A romance or a women's fiction. So I'm just going to write a story. And someone was saying, what do you do when you get stuck? Well, this past week and the week before, I've been trying to do what Dean Wesley Smith, and he wrote Star Trek movies, and he wrote Spider-Man, and he under pen names, and he's written so many things. His wife is Christine Catherine Rush, and they're just wonderful writers. But they just say write, and if you get stuck, well, take a deep breath and write the next word. Write the next word. And I've been trying to do that with an app called Brain FM, but it helps you focus. It plays this music in the background. And I sit down, and what I think is 15 minutes, it'll be an hour and a half. I just take off, and if I get stuck, I go get a drink of water, I come back, I turn that music on, I sit down, and I write the next word. If I get stuck, I write the next word, I write the next sentence. And I take off in a totally different direction, and I'm hoping it all comes together, but we'll see.
I mean, that's what the editing process is for, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't enjoy that because I think I've written something and then I haven't written it.
I think it also helps that Deb and I have now been scheduling talks, and we hold each other accountable for what our goals are. Just like our group, we all talk about that during our group, what we're working on, what our goals are, things like that. And we hold one another softly accountable because we all understand life happens. I mean, you know, but the thing that I wanted to encourage Deb with was what Kevin said. He couldn't write for something else. He had to write from his heart, not trying to imitate anybody else. You can learn from someone else, like he was learning from that author London, but he still had to develop his own style. None of us, we can use him as a guide, but we shouldn't try and imitate him, because we are who we are. If you get a good editor or a good feedback, like Ruth was talking, she did not, your feedback should always come with recommendations for changes or corrections, things like that. When you are writing in your own self, there's still going to be a time where you grow. I mean, I haven't even been writing for 2 years in fiction. And my editor has just kind of cut me loose to do my own line editing. She says, "You're ready for this." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm scared." You know, but I'm doing it because she doesn't want me hanging on her apron strings, because there are going to be times that I have to do it. But Ruth, I did want to say again about what somebody says. I sent off something to get reviewed, and they sent it back. And I was floored. I was hurt. And I actually gave it to my editor. And I said, "I don't understand what this means, and I'm hurt." I did not throw it away. It's a book I'm doing right now on Kindle Vella. I pulled it out and I reread it. Now that I've been through developmental editing and worked with some copy editors, I realized what they said was true. And I had to make some changes on my stuff to make it work right. What I had in my story was this king sent off his men to investigate, and he was the one that should have been, because he's the hero. So I had to change the entire beginning of my story. But once I did that, everything flowed. So sometimes what we get back may not sit right with us. Just set it on the shelf and ignore it, and then pick it up later. And it might make sense. It might not, still. Because usually if they don't know you, they don't know where you're coming from. Because the ones that I have worked with very well have come to know me, and they understand my writing, and they are very, very polite, and they always tell me, "Remember, it's your book. You don't have to take my advice." So I hope that encourages you, and anybody else who gets a bad, thinks they get a bad review or feels like they get a bad review. And for anybody who thinks that they can't measure up to somebody else, you stand yourself up to the wall and mark it. That's your measuring stick. You, not anybody else. That sounded like a downer, but I hope it's not.
So Deborah, I can relate to the idea of having like a type of writing stuck in your head when you're trying to create something else. So I did a bunch of writing for websites. I did a lot of articles and things of that nature. And then when I started to write, when I parlayed into fiction, a lot of the style of writing was very snappy, and it read like you were reading like a newspaper article, where especially like a website article, it's meant to like you just burn through it, make it so that people can burn through it because they're going to stop reading it for 4 paragraphs.
I did that too for several years. I wrote for different websites and dumbed down my writing, and I mean, tried to write for the average person.
Right.
So it's a totally different kind of writing.
Yeah. So the way that I got, like, I kind of weaned myself off of that is I decided to write a series of short stories, like, for myself, about my blinds and the adventures that they go on when the sun is out and they go up and down and the twisting. Right. So like that was practice for me. So I wrote this really extensive series of stories about my blinds and, you know, how they felt, you know, like, oh, the sun's out. No, don't hide me away. Don't do it. Oh, no, I can't. It's that sort of thing. And then that helped me transition from the style of writing for websites to being able to slow it down and make it more narrative. And then like my years as an actor helped as well, because you have to, when you're embodying a character and the choices that you make, you really have to sit in things, right? So following the practice of sitting in things, I was able to more, you know, thoroughly describe how my blinds felt every time I twisted them up or yanked them really hard. So now they're at the height of the ceiling and all they really want to do is reach for the windowsill, all that jazz, because they're best friends, obviously. So
Charming.
yeah.
I have one comment. I received a lot of compliments about the cover, so I just want to thank Stephanie. I think she left, but thank you very much.
Yes.
It's a wonderful cover. Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll tell her that. She'll be really happy to hear. Great. All right. So that being said, thank you everybody for attending our author question and answer. Again, our authors on the project: Allison, Soleah, Anna, me, MD, Kathleen, Jonathon, Dena, Lynn, Aletta B, Jerry, and Urbin. Thank you everybody for participating. If you want to take a quick glance at the chat, everyone that is attending, and you want to take note of a website so that you might follow your the authors on here, you have 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and that's great. So it was lovely having you.
Daniel.
Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everybody.
It's been fantastic.
Nice
And
to meet all of you.
yeah, great.
See
So
you Thursday.
see everybody next time.
See you guys
Be
Thursday.
well. Thank
Or
you.
whatever.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.